Here are the top stories for today, September 30, 2020. President Duterte meets incumbent House Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano and Congressman Lord Alan Velasco to discuss House speakership issue. Malacanang said Duterte is seeking for a dialogue and not shutdown of Facebook. President Rodrigo Duterte and actress Angel Locsin are said to be the most admired personalities. And let us know the people's reactions on the resumption of operations of provincial buses. Good day, I'm William Theo. Welcome to the PNA Newsroom. Marinduque Representative Lord Alan Velasco is set to take over as Speaker of the House of Representatives. This was reportedly firmed up following President Rodrigo Duterte's meeting with incumbent Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano, Velasco, and their allies last night in Malacanang. A lawmaker present in the Malacanang meeting said the two sides agreed to honor their original 15 to 21 term sharing deal brokered by President Duterte himself in 2019. Under that gentleman's agreement, Cayetano would serve as House Speaker for the first 15 months or until October 2020, while Velasco would take over and assume the position for the remaining 21 months or until the 18th Congress ends in 2022. The turnover is expected to take place on October 14. The Philippine government has identified two new indicators for its community quarantine classification. According to Dr. John Wong, an epidemiologist and a member of the Interagency Task Force's Sub-Technical Working Group, the government would be using the average daily attack rate and the two-week growth rate to identify which level of community quarantine an area may be classified. With the new community qualification, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the GCQ status in Metro Manila is justified by the numbers. He also expressed hope that the National Capital Region will shift to the more relaxed modified general community quarantine soon.
Just to explain our two new indicators, no. The first one, average daily attack rate or incidence rate. This is a measure of risk of the population, risk of infection in a certain LGU. So high ADARs means if you live there, your risk of getting the infection is high, and vice versa. No. For the second indicator, no, two-week growth rate. This is a measure of the growth of the epidemic in that area. No? So we're comparing the number of new cases in the past 2 weeks to the number of new cases 3 to 4 weeks, no? or the 2 weeks previous to that. No? And we measure this in terms of percentage.
Ang sabi po ni Dr. Wong, nasarado ito. Paki-flash po yan. Ang GCQ for Metro Manila is because ang ating two-week growth rate po ay 45%, kaya nasa medium tayo, 0 to 200. At ang ating daily, tama. At ang ating average attack rate is 5.8, kaya talagang nasa medium tayo. Okay? Ulitin ko po, at daily attack rate is at 5.8 per 100,000, moderate. And our two-week growth rate is at 45%. So, talagang medium tayo and moderate GCQ. May pag-asa naman po, no, as reported by the UP Octa Group, no, ang growth rate naman po natin ay bumagsak din. Tapos, yung ating attack rate ay bumabagsak din. No? So, there's always hope.
Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana believes Metro Manila could be downgraded into modified general community quarantine within a month. Lorenzana said many LGUs want to downgrade to MGCQ. However, some also want to retain the GCQ status so that they could arrange their COVID-19 prevention efforts. He said some Metro Manila LGUs are afraid to loosen restrictions, fearing that the region might return to modified enhanced community quarantine due to a possible spike in COVID-19 cases. Meanwhile, DILG Secretary Eduardo Año cited the need to strengthen efforts to put COVID-19 patients in isolation facilities. Año said the people who had close contacts with the COVID-19 patients must be tested for the disease before being allowed to go out of their homes. Meanwhile, the IATF-EID maintains the quarantine restrictions on senior citizens, saying the task force is not bothered by the petition filed at the Supreme Court questioning their authority to pass mandatory policy.
Karapatan niya yan, pero naninindigan pong IATF na yung prohibition po sa galaw ng mga seniors is borne by science and medicine. Sa buong daigdig po, ang mga tinatamaan at namamatay sa COVID-19 ay ang mga seniors at merong comorbidities. And that's a scientific fact. So itong kaso po, bagamat hindi natin pinapangunahan ng Supreme Court, tingin ko po wala pong mangyayari dyan.
Metro Manila's biggest quarantine facility was inaugurated along with a newly constructed access road completed by the DPWH. DPWH Secretary Mark Villar said the 525-bed Soler Pagcor Mega Quarantine Center, funded by the Razon Group, will encourage mild to symptomatic patients from Metro Manila and other nearby provinces to isolate outside their homes. In a palace briefing, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque recognized the role being played by the private sector in combating the pandemic.
Pero fortunately, maraming gaya ng Razon Group, nandyan na rin po ang MVP Group, nandyan na rin po yung Ayala Group na tumutulong naman po sa gobyerno sa pagbibigay po ng mga pangangailangan natin sa COVID.
President Rodrigo Duterte and actress Angel Locsin made it on the top list of the most admired man and woman. The YouGods 2020 study, released on September 23, gathered nominations from January to March. The British firm compiled the men and women who received the most nominations and were nominated in at least 4 states. In the men's category, Duterte topped the list, followed by Senator Manny Pacquiao and Manila Mayor Isko Moreno. In the women's category, Locsin is at number 1, followed by 2018 Miss Universe Catriona Gray and actress Sara Geronimo. Actress Liza Soberano is at number 6, while Vice President Leni Robredo is at number 15. Malacanang said President Rodrigo Duterte was not threatened to stop the operation of Facebook in the country, while he scored the social media giant for taking down accounts and pages advocating something that is good for the people. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said Duterte is open to a dialogue between the government and Facebook. More on this from Marita Moahe.
Facebook, listen to me. We allow you to operate here, hoping that you could help us also. Now, if government cannot espouse or advocate something which is good for the good of the people, then what is your purpose here in my country? Kung hindi tayo magkaintindihan dyan, mag-usap tayo uli. Is there life after Facebook? I don't know. Pero mag-usap tayo.
Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque clarifies the statement of President Duterte questioning the recent move of Facebook to take down some advocacy pages.
Gusto ni Presidente na makipag-usap kasama ang Facebook matapos tanggalin ng social media giant ang ilang sa mga advocacy pages na pabor po sa gobyerno.
One of the pages shut down was the Hands Off Our Children, whose advocacy is to prevent minors from being recruited into organizations espousing violent extremism.
Ang alam ko, ang galit na galit hindi lang ang Presidente, kung hindi ang iba pang mga ahensya ng gobyerno, yung Save Our Children. Kasi nga po, obviously, talagang yan po ay tinitira ang NPA for the notorious recruitment of children, which is an international crime. No? Sa ICC po, ang dami na pong na-convict dyan for the criminal recruitment of children as combatants. And yet, pati yon tinanggal ng Facebook.
Roque also scored the so-called fact-checkers of Facebook.
Ang punto dito, bakit kapag pabor sa gobyerno, tinatanggal? Kapag pabor sa oposisyon, hindi tinatanggal, no? Bakit ang fact-checkers laban sa gobyerno? Sino pa dito sa bayan na ito ang magdududa na ang Rappler at ang Vera Files ay talaga namang kontra sa administrasyon ni Presidente Duterte? Bakit sila lamang ang kinuhang fact-checkers ng Facebook? Hello, kung hindi ka kumbensado na, na laban sila sa gobyerno, baka ikay taga-ibang planeta, no?
For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Marita Muaje.
The House of Representatives is set to launch a probe on Facebook shutdown of advocacy pages. Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano slammed Facebook's partisan move as it took down verified accounts of Filipinos supporting the police and military while allowing the proliferation of Facebook accounts, pages, and communities that directly call for the violent overthrow of a democratically elected government. Cayetano said, while the government always welcomes dissent and protest, we should and will never tolerate violence and terrorism. Meanwhile, the Armed Forces of the Philippines thanked President Rodrigo Duterte for questioning Facebook's decision. AFP spokesperson Marine Major General Edgardo said the military is appealing to Facebook executives to look into the contents of the accounts of groups that have been taken down, like Hands Off Our Children, which consists of parents whose children were recruited and afterward taken by the NPA to serving into their ranks. Rebellia earlier said the military shares and advances the advocacy of this group and that members of Hands Off Our Children have approached the AFP for help in their efforts to locate their missing children and prevent other parents from suffering a similar fate. In Cebu City, the local government unit created a task force that will assist in the smooth return of traditional public utility jeepney operations. Mayor Edgardo Rebellia said the task force would look into the possibility of allowing traditional jeepneys to return to Cebu City streets under the new normal scenario and to come up with guidelines in doing so. The task force will also assess the current volume of passengers in the city to determine the number of jeepneys to be allowed to ply the streets, even though the city is under another month of modified general community quarantine. As provincial buses resume their operations today, the Joint Task Force COVID Shield ordered police officers to intensify visibility at the bus terminals. Joint Task Force COVID Shield Commander Lieutenant General Guillermo Aliazar said this is to ensure that both the bus company employees and the passengers will observe the minimum health safety standard protocols. Among these are the proper wearing of face masks and face shields and the observation of physical distancing inside the passenger buses. Let us find out what the public has to say about the resumption of provincial bus operations to and from Metro Manila.
Okay lang po basta as long as safe naman yung mga tao. Basta nasa naman po, nasusunod nila yung protocol ng bansa. Tungkol dun sa safety ng mga tao sa COVID.
Pabor na pabor.
Bakit po?
Kasi maluwag ang pag-uwi at pabalik ng mga pasahero.
Kung sa safety po, kumbaga medyo mahirap kasi yung yung virus po andito pa rin po. Pero kasi merong mga na-stranded po dito, 'di ba, yung mga LSI. Kailangan na rin po nila makauwi sa kanilang probinsya.
Sa akin, sir, masasabi ko, hindi pa.
Bakit po yan?
Kasi active pa rin yung COVID virus eh. Tsaka baka walang kitain din yung mga driver at mga bus conductor kung limited lang yung pasahero.
Pabor naman para din sa mga tao na nangangailangan ng trabaho. And basta ipatupad pa rin yung mga health procedure natin, yung mga katulad ng face shield, pag-wear ng face shield and yung social distancing.
Mas maganda siguro kung sigurado muna nilang safe at ma-monitor nila yung mga taong sasakay. Okay lang, mas maganda. Kung pabor ako, but yung ating security o seguridad ng mga pasahero, sana ma-monitor nila. Wala namang problema kung babalik ang provincial bus. Malaki rin tulong yan sa mga stranded natin tao. Tsaka yung gusto maghanap ng trabaho ngayong pagbabalik ng mga sakayin.
Still to come, let us find out what the local government units are doing in containing the spread of COVID-19. And the tourism department is going online in accrediting tourism establishments. More on these when the PNA Newsroom continues.
Sa matinding laban natin sa Coronavirus Disease 2019, sugpuin din natin ang pagkalat ng fake news. Huwag magbahagi ng impormasyon na hindi tiyak ang pinagmulan. I-check mabuti ang source ng balita. Kumuha lamang ng impormasyon mula sa mga official channel ng Department of Health. Huwag magpadala sa maling balita, basta't sama-sama at laging handa. Kaya natin to. Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
You're still watching the PNA Newsroom. With the imposition of the new community quarantine status in the country, local government units are all set in implementing additional measures to protect their constituents. Chris Mundo has the story.
In Cebu City, the local health department said it supports the decision of President Rodrigo Duterte to place the city under a modified general community quarantine or MGCQ status until October 31. The MGCQ status allows the gradual reopening of the economy, a reason the local government is making sure that establishments follow the strict minimum health and safety standards in their area. In Bacolod, during the MECQ, the city government employed the home quarantine pass system to limit the movement of its residents and enforced a lockdown on Sundays during the entire September. They also suspended all forms of public transportation and shut down the majority of businesses in the city. Bacolod City's quarantine status would be upgraded to GCQ starting tomorrow. In North Cotabato, the Provincial Interagency Task Force on COVID-19 has lifted the localized lockdown in 2 areas of the province as no new cases are recorded. The focused lockdown on Sinsuat Street in Kidapawan City and in Burgos Street of Midsayap Town have been lifted on Monday night. In South Cotabato, local officials are currently fast-tracking the implementation of the community hospital's 2-year transition plan. The Department of Health and the local government jointly crafted the plan last February to set up the transfer and development of the Upper Valley Community Hospital in Barangay Dahay, Surala into the Socsargen General Hospital. The facility was mainly established to decongest patients at the main provincial hospital. It formally started its operation in January 2017 as a 10-bed infirmary and was adopted by the provincial government last April as a dedicated isolation and treatment facility for COVID-19. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Chris Mundo.
The House of Representatives on Tuesday deferred the deliberation on the proposed budget of the Presidential Communications Operations Office for 2021 over allegation of red tagging by an undersecretary. Minority Leader Bienvenido Abante demanded that PCOO Undersecretary Lorraine Badoy issue an apology for her statements against Makabayan Bloc members whom she accused of supporting the communist terrorist movement. Abante also called for the removal of Badoy and the removal of social media posts that attack government critics. For his part, House Committee on Appropriations Vice Chair Jose Enrique Garcia maintained that Badoy's statements were her personal opinion and do not reflect that of the agencies. Earlier, PCOO Secretary Martin Andanar has refuted allegations that government media platforms are being used to red tag political groups. Andanar assured that the proposed 1.59 billion peso 2021 budget for the PCOO will be spent to strengthen information dissemination, especially during the pandemic. The Department of Budget and Management, or DBM, has denied overpricing in the procurement of personal protective equipment. In a statement, the DBM asserts that it operates with utmost transparency. The agency said notices of award and other related documents for PPE acquisition have been made public. It also lamented that the PPE procurement issue has become political in nature. In a press release, Senator Risa Ontiveros alleged that the DBM procured overpriced PPE last April and May. She said the DBM tapped 4 local firms to supply PPE, but the government had favored 7 Chinese-owned companies whose products are more expensive. The DBM said it has asked Ontiveros' office for the basis for her supposed findings of overpricing, but has not received a reply. Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. opposed anew the sale of Philippine properties in Japan. This after President Rodrigo Duterte said proceeds from a possible sale could be used to sustain the operations of PhilHealth. In a Twitter post, Locsin protested that several government agencies have properties that are idle and should be sold for funding instead. He also criticized a few agencies whom he accused of showing a lousy response to the COVID-19 crisis. Duterte on Monday said the government would sell its real estate properties in Japan to raise money for the beleaguered PhilHealth that had been beset with anomalies and corruption. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque, however, clarified on Tuesday that the call was a mere suggestion should the Philippines need to augment its fund to respond against the pandemic. Hotels, travel agencies, and other tourism enterprises can now apply for accreditation through the Department of Tourism's digital accreditation system. The online system would facilitate accreditation requests, contactless transactions, and hazard-free government services. Accredited tourism enterprises are certified as having complied with the minimum standards for operation under the new normal. Tourism Secretary Bernadette Romulo Puyat said they hope to ease the burden of local businesses who make the backbone of the tourism industry. She said the system also fulfills President Duterte's call for the streamlining and automation of government services. Tourism Congress of the Philippines President Jose Clemente III, meanwhile, said that the launch of the new portal is timely as mobility remains limited at present due to the pandemic. A total of 10,042 tourism enterprises were accredited nationwide as of September 15. Local carriers Philippine Airlines and AirAsia Philippines on Tuesday will soon fly to Manila and Caticlan in time for the reopening of Boracay Island beginning October 1st. PAL spokesperson Shelo Villaluna said the carrier would mount the Manila-Caticlan-Manila service on October 1, 9, and 11 before gradually adding flights. AirAsia Philippines, on the other hand, will initially fly between Manila and Caticlan once a week starting October 2. The Godofredo R. Ramos Airport in Caticlan will be the sole port of entry for tourists traveling by air. Passengers must present a negative RT-PCR test result at least 48 to 72 hours before the date of arrival. Those flying with PAL and AirAsia may contact their respective carriers for more information on requirements for travel. Up next, former NPA rebels receive 4 million aid from the government. And we will bring you the majestic view of Sarangani Bay. The PNA Newsroom returns after these reminders.
Tandaan ang tamang paraan ng paghuhugas at paglilinis ng kamay upang makaiwas sa iba't ibang karamdaman. Basain ng tubig ang mga kamay at sabunin. Unang sabunin ang mga palad at ang likod ng mga kamay. Kuskusin na maigi ang pagitan ng mga daliri at maging ang mga kuko. Isunod ang pagitan ng mga hinlalaki at kuskusin ng paikot ang mga dulo ng mga daliri sa magkabilang palad. Banlawang mabuti ang mga kamay sa malinis na tubig at patuyuin ang mga kamay gamit ang single-use towel o air dryer. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
Selected senior citizens in Butuan City received starter kits for vegetable farming from the Office of Senior Citizens Affairs. Each of the initial 30 recipients received assorted vegetable seeds, pots, seedling trays, working gloves, gardening sprinklers, and vermicompost materials for fertilizer. The initiative aims to encourage senior citizens to engage in a productive hobby while they are on quarantine during the pandemic. City Information Officer Michiko De Jesus said most of those who received their starter kits were members who have already gone through the containerized organic vegetable gardening training. The local government and OSCA designed a program that would enable the beneficiaries to become productive while under home quarantine. Former members of the Communist New People's Army from Caraga region received over 4 million pesos in financial aid from the Department of Social Welfare and Development. About 204 former rebels each received 20,000 pesos. The cash aid is part of the DSWD's Livelihood Settlement Grant, or LSG, made in support of the Enhanced Comprehensive Local Integration Program. DSWD 13 Information Officer Marco Davy Reyes also said the LSG supports the whole-of-nation approach to end the local communist conflicts as mandated by Executive Order Number 70. Through the LSG and ECLIP, Reyes said NPA surrenderers are given the opportunity to start their own small businesses with their families. DSWD Caraga is eyeing to provide livelihood assistance to 600 former rebels for the year 2021. The Philippine Army has condemned the communist terrorist group New People's Army for brutally killing a former member who surrendered to the government in Matuguinao, Samar. Former rebel Carlos Diaz had been living peacefully with his family in upland Nagpapacao village when the NPA shot him to death on Monday morning. Diaz surrendered in August 2018. 19th Infantry Battalion Commander Jasper Justito Pecson said the NPA has been scaring their former members and supporters and even killing those who oppose their propaganda. Meanwhile, 8th Infantry Division Commander Pio Diñoso III called on the Commission on Human Rights and self-declared human rights advocates to condemn the murder. This year, at least 5 former rebels were reportedly abducted and murdered by the NPA in Leyte and Samar. The collection of wild exotic plants may be trendy this quarantine period, but not only does it endanger the environment, but it can also land you in jail. The Department of Environment and Natural Resources, or DENR, reminded plantitos and plantitas that collection of wildlife from its natural habitat, whether animals or even plants, is illegal and punishable by law. This is stated under Section 27 of Republic Act 9147, otherwise known as the Wildlife Resources Conservation and Protection Act of 2001. The agency said that while they promote urban gardening and greening in the cities, there may be people who are unaware that such a law exists. Those proven to be violating this law may be jailed for up to 4 years and fined up to 300,000 pesos. Tourists can now look forward to visiting a cleaner and livelier Sarangani Bay as efforts to conserve and protect its coral reefs have made the area healthy and improving. The Provincial Environment and Natural Resources Office said the improvement in Sarangani Bay's coral ecosystem is attributed to its expanded conservation and protection program. Penro head Rolando Tubalia said proof of this can be seen in coral reefs located near the province's coastal municipalities, which had been declared as marine protected areas or MPAs. One of these is the Tuca Reef, part of Tuca Marine Park in Kiamba, and the first and successful coral transplantation area in Sarangani. Aside from the continued conservation of the coral reefs, Tubalia said they are pushing for the declaration of more coral reef sites into MPAs. They have also intensified the law enforcement activities as well as information and education campaigns about the need to protect the corals in local communities. Here's another look at today's biggest stories. President Duterte meets incumbent House Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano and Congressman Lord Alan Velasco to discuss House Speakership issue. Malacanang said Duterte is seeking for a dialogue and not shutdown of Facebook. President Rodrigo Duterte and actress Angel Locsin are said to be the most admired personalities. And let us know the people's reactions on the resumption of operations of provincial buses. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check more news content, visit our webpage or head onto the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all of our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also, watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know. From the PNA Newsroom, I am William Theo. Good day, stay safe, everyone.